Joe Mason. Who Joe Walsh is. Joe began his career 32 years ago and is the CEO of Walk in Walkstown, which provides services to persons with an intellectual disability. Joe, you're very welcome and thanks for coming. Beside Joe is, as Pat just mentioned, is Patricia Gilheany, who's the CEO of the Mental Health Commission. Patricia attended the workshop on the ADM. Ms. Gilheany was appointed Chief Executive in October 2011, following a period of interim Chief Executive. She joined the Commission as the first Director of Standards and Quality Assurance in October 2003 and led the development and implementation of the regulatory system for mental health services. So Patricia would be key to the development of the capacity legislation, and I assume and understand that she will be in negotiations with the Department of Health and the Department of Justice to try and get that service up and going. Thanks, Patricia, for attending. Adrian Noonan is one of Inclusion Ireland's self-advocates. He's a member and PRO of the Inclusion Ireland Board Subcommittee of Self-Advocates. Adrian, thanks for attending. Adrian has been very active in terms of driving self-advocacy issues both within the organisation and outside the organisation. Originates in Kilkenny, is it? Yeah. And Shas is a self-advocacy group in Kilkenny. Adrian, thanks for coming. You've met Pat Healy. Mary McCarran is Professor Mary McCarran is from Trinity Faculty of Health Services and Chair of Ageing and Intellectual Disability at Trinity College Dublin. Leading multidisciplinary health sciences, Professor McCarran is committed to regular research into ageing at Trinity College Dublin. And while I'm on the subject, Professor McCarran has offered for people who have experience or questions around the ageing of their family members. She's available after this open forum to take questions or to talk to family members if they'd like to. She's very kindly offered to stay back and meet with people. So you could, if you're interested in talking to Mary, you could approach one of our staff or approach Mary at the end. And thanks for that, Mary, and thanks for attending. Tom Healy is a long-time disability activist and advocate. He hails from the Gaeltacht, and he's been our chair for the last 2 years and is just about to step down as chairperson. And again, Tom has been a very strong advocate of reform and change and choice, and he's been driving that agenda within Inclusion Ireland for the last couple of years. So, Tom, thanks for coming. So, can I ask the workshop feedbackers, I don't know what you're actually called, so they're starting with the complex. Are we starting with the complex support needs? Yeah?
Yes. Hi, I'm Karen Wise. I have 3 children with autism. I have autism myself. I'm married to a person with autism, so I can imagine it's a hectic household. And our key points were, it's the first time we heard the criticism of the congregating settings report. We actually want to hear more about this, because it's an honest report, and we want to find out what went wrong and see what we can improve. And individual needs of people with complex needs need to be recognised. Like you're saying before, one size does not fit all. We have gone from shoving everybody in an institution into everybody coming out into the community. That's fine, but if there's no supports there to help them, what are we going to do? And as you get older, your complex needs gets more and more complex. They don't just go away. And then evidence of this is from I have this speech ahead of me. Evidence of IDS that needs to be disseminated and publicised. This is the longitudinal survey of ageing in people with intellectual disabilities. And another key point was 18 years old for a person and middle age for the parents. These are key transition points. They're very, very important. It's a harsh reality when you realise, you may have had to beat on the door and harass people and hound them to get the services for your child once they're under 18. But the moment they're 18, boom, they're off the radar. There's nothing to be done. And speaking as a person as a son who's 20 years old tomorrow, nothing much once they're 18. It's bad if you think it's bad when they're under 18. Wait until they go over 18. You realise what despair feels like. It's a harsh reality of once you get in your 40s and you look at your child or children and say, how am I going to provide for them? Another point on this is that the state relies too much on the parents, on our love and devotion and unwavering dedication to our children, that we will not let them go and not be well cared for. Now, what's going to happen when we don't want to pass the burden of caring for that particular individual onto their siblings? We chose to have the children. It's our duty to look after them, and the siblings might say, well, we look after them, but we don't want the guilt of that. We want them to have the support that they need in the outer community to help themselves, to live happy and fulfilling lives. Now, community is not a geographical location. We have all seen it, and I have friends that they were lumped together in a group home because the person has a similar type of need to another person. They don't know these people. It's like saying that, well, everybody called Murphy, just go over and live in that town because you call it Murphy. It doesn't work like that. A community has a different meaning for the individual, and these needs need to be recognised. The context and meaning of community participation for severity around disability is different and needs to be defined, because you can't just say, well, we're dumping that person, and I mean dumping, I've seen a few, dumping that person in that location. Well, there's no bus service. Well, it runs once or twice a day. The people won't talk to you because you act a bit funny, and I've had that. So the questions are, does the state, the HSE, accept responsibility?
Do you mind if I come back to the questions? And we'll open up the questions.
Okay, well, and another thing we had was that if it takes 2 incomes to buy a house now, how is somebody supposed to stay at home, care for their child, and have a stable home, i.e. they have bought their house to leave something to their child? And where are the houses for people with disabilities? Where?
Okay. So I'm going to come back to you with the questions after we get feedback from each of the sessions. Thanks for that. Assisted decision making? Thanks, Patricia.
In the Assisted Decision Making Act of 2015 workshop, Sarah Lennon from Inclusion facilitated a panel. And in our panel, we had Claire Hendrick, who's a self-advocate, Mary Farrell, who's a family member, Suzanne Jones, who's of the Civil Law Reform Division in the Department of Justice, and Patricia Gilheeney, CEO of the Mental Health Commission. Claire, with great inspiration and determination, gave us her story as a ward of court from 2011 to 2013. She became a ward of court as a result of her mother dying and her family home being sold. And in the process of being a ward of court, she gave vision to the reality of not being able to access her money, not being able to make decisions then, of course, around housing, and also not being able to make decisions around relationships. As a result, with support from her family and Inclusion Ireland, she created a support network, and with sheer determination, she was able to get out of being a ward of court, which is very rare. And she has created supports for herself and bought a home and is working to become a childcare provider, worker. Mary Farrell, a family member, has a son, age 48. He's been a ward of court for 25 years. And Mary gave us a very heartfelt description of how families feel disempowered and voiceless in the ward of court system, and of the antagonistic relationship that families often have with the courts and also with the HSE around their individual being in a ward of court. She mentioned numerous times about how there's no consultation with families. Families feel often that they have done something wrong as a result of their family member involuntarily having become a ward of court. And she spoke of the views of families who are in conflict constantly with the ward of court, with courts. Questions that she posed were, how can this antagonistic relationship with the courts be improved upon? She spoke in favor of the Assisted Decision Making Act and pushed forward for its commencement, but also had concern about when the wards of court will have their needs met, and will families' voices be heard, and in particular for those who've lost funds as a result of poor investments by the courts over the years, will there be redress, and will access to dormant funds be set aside for transition within the decision support service. Suzanne Jones of the Civil Law Reform Division gave us a background to the Assisted Decision Making Act. Since 2008, has been in the works, becoming a bill in December of 2015, and with that, emphasized that everyone has a right to be making their own decisions, that there are some 2,000 people, individuals who are current wards of court, and with the enactment of this law, there will be 3 years of process for those who in the wards of court and then to be members or to become overseen by the Decision Support Service. She emphasized that implementation must reflect the will and preference of the person, and that decision-making supports will be structured, and that intervention will be only taken when necessary, and that there will be very much a functional approach related to that particular matter in question and at that particular time in question, and that the commencement is hoped for December of this year, December 2016. Questions that arose were who's responsible?
Can I come back to you with the questions?
Okay.
Yeah,
and the CEO of the Mental Health Commission, Patricia, spoke about how they are eager to implement the act, and despite the last minute appointment, that they have a staff of 23, they're eager to do well, and that they're working hard with the detail and scoping, and emphasize that it must be done right, and that they need to promote public confidence for this decision support office to be successful, and that collaboration with other bodies is essential.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks for that. Self-advocacy? Hi, Martin. Get your mic.
Just a few issues that we got from the group this morning is transport, housing, and decision making. Transport is essential. Transport is essential. In some rural areas, many buses do not accept wheelchairs, and some people cannot use the pass on some of the private buses. That is not accessible. Bus area staff are not trained to use accessible buses. Transport strategy by PWD for PWD. Housing, not enough community house and support for people making that move. When will this be brought in? Housing strategy for PBD and for PWD. And the system isn't, when is that going to come into effect?
Okay, all right, thanks for that. And finally, innovative approaches to... Sorry. I'm going to come back to you with the questions, Phil. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
It's to do with jobs, and it's about the disability allowance being cut because of people wanting to go to work. And there was a lot of fear about that. And people wanted a job strategy by people with disabilities for people with disabilities. And the next one was personalised budgets. When will they be easily available to a person with disabilities so that they can decide who supports they want, what supports they want, and who gives them? And people want to know when the ratifying of the UN Convention and when is it going to be put in place, and the support for it.
Thanks, Phil. Sorry for interrupting you there. So, innovative approaches to today's service. I'm going to come back with questions, is that okay? I'm going to come back with questions in a sec. The very last workshop? Catherine, sorry.
Yeah, we had a great morning, actually, very positive work and positive examples of doing it differently. And I suppose the key words that came out of it really were, family are crucial to this working and working properly and effectively and maintaining a very high standard. Community are also crucial. Can't expect people to live in the community unless the community are made aware that they're living there and are accepting and supportive, and that it's local as well. That people are rooted in their local communities is very important. So we had a presentation from Possibilities Plus, from IFA, and they're a pretty small organisation. I think she said they support 14 people in total, and they're only in existence since about 2012, so it's all relatively new, but they're doing very sort of intensive and very deliberate work, and they're trying to set a standard and maintain a standard, and they have great integrity in the work that they do, and I think the key to the type of work that they're trying to do is that they're working with families and individuals, I suppose, living in the context of their families. So it's a very collaborative approach, and they try to get to know the person's story, as they said. So, historically where you come from and what sort of a culture your family, the environment that your family live in and the culture of the family, and that's what the values and standards that your own family would hold within it. And they try and work from that basis to create a very good life for the individual, while acknowledging that it's very hard work and that it takes time. You don't create a very good life overnight. So I thought it was a very honest representation of the type of work that they're doing, and they are, as I say, taking it slowly because it needs to be taken slowly. And then we had a presentation from the parents from Louth, Jacinta and Anne-Marie, and that I suppose its genesis really was from the family basis, that the families got together, basically. They're an autism support group, and they got together to try and create something better for the school leavers, if you like. So they set up what's a hub, as they're known now, which would be a community base out of which people would go and do various activities and be involved in their local communities. So the hub is just the place from which they go to do the activities, or to participate in their communities. They're not actually, it's not a service, it's not a centre, it's simply just the place that they go to head off from, if you like. And again, it was very much around the relationship between families and the HSE. They got it off the ground because they had a good relationship with the HSE, and because they were able to get GENIO funding also. But it is that collaboration between families and the HSE and trusting relationships being developed. That was a key throughout all the presentations as well. Then we had Jonathan and Fionn, who have a different type of approach again, and they're working from an individual budget. And it was difficult, I suppose, to get the individualised budget, but they did use the services of an intermediary. It was Martin Upton in the end through AT, and they're kind of doing their own thing, really. And as Jonathan says, it's quite a radical sort of these are his words, not mine. It's probably the most radical of the approaches that we saw this morning, but in lots of ways, as he said himself, it's very family based. So Jonathan is Fionn's dad, and they are on this journey together. But the intention is that Jonathan, over time, would be replaced by other people who would be there to support Fionn. Once Fionn, I suppose, has explored and developed and created new hobbies and interests, and kind of figures out who he is and what his place is in the world, I think that's the intention. So that's their journey, and lucky them, they have quite an itinerary for the rest of the year in terms of travel and climbing and all sorts of things, which is lovely. And then we heard from Anne Corr, who is the training coordinator for training and employment in SOS Kilkenny. And SOS Kilkenny then, on the other hand, are in existence for 40 years, and they're a sort of big service provider in Kilkenny, who have, I think, fantastically decided to change how they do things and change the value basis of the work that they're doing. Again, it's difficult, and trying to implement change in a big organisation is difficult, but they seem to be making great progress. And again, families are crucial in the work that they're doing in terms of getting to know the people that they're working with and trying to support. And everything they do has a purpose. So there is no aimless wandering around shopping centres or coffee shops. Everything has a purpose, and it's building towards a good life in ordinary places, and they seem to be making great progress. So.
brilliant. Thanks for that, Catherine. Before I get to questions, Minister, I'm just conscious you're on time pressure. Do you want to respond? And,
Can I just respond? Is this on? Is it on? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just thanks, Pat. I just want to respond to a number of the issues, and maybe the rest of the panel then respond in more detail. So, just in relation to two things that I did leave out in my area contribution is in relation to the importance of respite and residential services as well. And that's something that we managed to get a few about to put into over the next couple of months as well. Just to say that I forgot to mention that in my speech, because it is a major problem for some families, and it's a priority issue for me, particularly those families in crisis where the parents are very old, are not able to look after their adults with disabilities in their 40s and 50s. So just to say that. The second thing is in relation to the congregated settings. I think it was Karen talked about there. There are still 2,725 still in congregated settings, and I'm working with Pat and the HSE and the Department of Health on a plan for that, and we hope to have some news in relation to that over the next couple of weeks. And I mean that, I'm not making I know that Pat and some of the departments have done a lot of work on this particular issue, and we hope to have an announcement very, very soon. Just in relation to the housing issue, somebody mentioned the housing. Yes, there is an emergency situation in regards to housing in the wider society, but there is also a huge crisis in relation to people with disabilities, and we have to give priority to that. On the assisted decision-making issue, that antagonistic relationship, that lack of consultations with the person, the family, they all have to improve. And again, that's linked into the service that I was talking about earlier on. The relationships have to improve, and the family voices have to be heard. And then I think Martin touched on very important issues in relation to, I think it was transport and housing, and you were talking about the bus errand staff. I know some of the staff are particularly good, but there are major gaps in that service, and I accept that. I see the staff every morning because I drop my own daughter to the 41C every morning on the Whitehall Road, and I see the different levels of service of different people. So we need to up our game. And bus errand needs to up their game as well in relation to how they treat our children. But there is also some examples of excellent practice where staff have been very supportive of people with disabilities, and at times they've actually helped them a lot and rescued them a lot for a very, very negative situation. So I think it's important, but there has to be a consistency across the service. So I'd say that in relation to disability allowance, you can take a mark. That's not on my agenda. I wouldn't even go there in relation to putting disability allowance. That was a document that was going around the department, but that has to come back into me and into the cabinet. So that's not going to happen as far as I'm concerned. But the one thing I will say in relation to disability allowance is there are a number of people that have come to me who have a lot of disabilities that want to get into the workforce, and we have to up our game in relation to that as well. I've met a lot of talented people with physical disabilities in recent months particularly, who have fantastic skills, and they're not working in permanent, regular jobs, and we need to do something about that. And having objectives of 3% employment levels, I think we have to up our game and try and aim towards 5%. You also mentioned the UN Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities. I'm hoping, Mar, and again, I hope I don't have to go back on my word, I'm hoping to have this done by the end of the year, the winter, autumn. That's what I'm hoping, because again, it'll be up to the different departments. I'm working on meeting justice next week, so we need to do that to ensure that it's done. So they're the particular issues that I just want to cover, and then pass to the other members of the panel that deal with the other issues. Thank you very much. And I have to go to another event at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to thank Minister McGrath again for attending and taking the time out for something like that. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So,
I just want to say something to Finnan before he goes in. I was told to tell him,
I'm sorry, he's flying at the door, so I'm sorry, Kathleen, but
no, Trish said to tell him about that he sent an email to the chairperson.
okay, if you talk to one of our staff, we'll make sure that we connect you with his office. Is that okay? Okay. So, I mean, obviously from our point of view, we'd like the Minister to be more available to answer questions from the floor. Generally, that would be the way we do things, but as he said, he was under time pressure today. So I'm going to open the floor now to questions, and then we'll come back to specific questions from the workshop. Is that okay? So, Anne, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm around now to learn very quickly the right way. Getting sick in Ireland has been a steep learning curve for me. People who have lived without disability or sickness do not suddenly take on tiger's clothes. In other words, we don't change our personality to suit our disability. It's always been what we were born with and what we were. I have heard from many people struggling in the disability field getting needs met. We do not take on tiger's clothes for any other reason than we are wanting to get our needs met. It's not a personality trait. I am a religious society friend. I'm a Quaker, peace-loving. Now, I wonder about this nothing about us without us. I thought that had begun. The sense that you can say what your needs are. When I got sick, more or less in 2009, my needs then were played out by National Rehabilitation Hospital consultant, Orna Carroll. They're very clear, and not one has been implemented. The same issues since 2009 have been repeatedly said over and over again. Nothing has changed, except, of course, I seem to have taken off tiger's clothes, and things have gone to an enormous proportion to become a lion, and tigers, and everything. But basically, all the people fighting for their needs to be met are not agitators. They need to have their needs met. And it's nothing more than that. But I tell you, it would make you want to go into a hole and shut it over like a trap spider or whatever and never come out again. But I don't think it has to be like that. There is always a solution, and usually quicker than a longer one. And that is a worry, that it takes like a life of its own when you're trying to get needs met. I hope I put it clearly, but I'm 63. The 10 years have gone in hell. I do kind of want that just little window, Mr. Healy. I want that window that says to me, peace, quiet, gentleness, retirement, even. I want to shed the tiger's clothes and take up my paintbrush and, do what I'm good at. This isn't suit me. And it's a very hot set of tiger's clothes. I don't like it.
So, just to sum up, not quite as eloquently, the way that services communicate, the HC communicates, and the way we engage with the HC or have to engage in terms of getting service and support creates a kind of conflict dynamic, and you end up in this endless dispute, and then you become to be identified as problematic, as a problem person. This is said about, and it's been said to me a number of times by families when they're engaging with their service provider, that if they're seen to raise issues, they're seen as a problem. And there's also a sense of, well, actually, maybe you need to go somewhere else for your service. There's that threat hanging over them that they may lose the services if they become too vocal or create too many problems. So we'll get a response to that now in a second. Kate, then David, and then I'll go over to my left.
Thank you. I just want to address Pat. Pat, I listened to you there and you spoke about developing a model that is sustainable and that will be one size doesn't fit all. And that is so important for children and the adults with complex needs. You heard Elizabeth said there. My own case, I have an 18-year-old profoundly mentally handicapped child with intractable seizures. Her day centre, she's one of 6 children leaving now in June. We only got word last Thursday that the funding is now through, but now there has to be a place acquired for these 6 children. You're probably aware of the case. So essentially, when us, the parents, hear the words new directions, we feel sick. We actually feel sick. Because our children who are with this service from Naught are now being left. They are profound. It is very, very difficult to find or source a service as their parents. Even if you were to give me all the euro millions, I couldn't make the service that my child needs. It's frightening to think that they are to be left back with nothing from having a service. That's one aspect, the day service, the school. The other aspect for me, my own health went 3 years ago. I could no longer care for my child, which I never first saw in my wildest dreams because of her epilepsy. She had to go away and she's now back home with me. I, as I say, thought she would be in my care with me bringing in carers for her to help me into her future. Now, there is no residential in her service either, as you know, decongregate. I would like to know, where did the decongregate policy be rolled out without any consultation to families? We listened to Professor Mary McCarran there this morning in our workshop for complex needs, and she herself advocates that why is there not a small core group kept for the children like our children who need this care? And I would ask you please to revisit this policy. This is a closed door to us now, and I ask you please to reopen it. There has to be some provision for the small core group. It cannot be, as you're saying there, these children are not capable of that. So I would ask you please to revisit that. Thank you.
Just to be clear in terms of the question, because if there are services saying that residential services are closing because of decongregation, well, decongregation is where there are more than 10 people living together, and they're traditionally very large, institutionalised, or complexes where there might be a number of houses on the one site. So if service providers are describing closing a residential service as decongregation, then they're mixing 2 policies, because that's decongregation refers specifically to institutionalised settings where there are more than 10 people. I'll let Pat come back to this question, and we'll come back to the issue of decongregation in a sec. Is that okay?
It's just one reply, as I said. I'd ask Pat to go back to the likes of Professor Mary McCarran there. This lady has studied this. Like, if you won't listen to parents and families, can you not listen to the people that have done investigation into it, please? Like, you have to listen and take it from across the board. How can a policy just be rolled out? It's
Okay.
just nonsensical. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We'll come back. Yeah.
Say just to Pat, because I sat through Grace Stevens through the Public Accounts Committee, and Pat presented at that. You were there for questioning. I sat through all of that. You were there, and the DG for the Health Service, Tony O'Brien, and you promised me faithfully that you would come back. You took my details, and it was specifically in relation to that case that I wanted you to actually meet with the family to actually learn what needs to be changed. Do you know, and you promised me faithfully, and I'm still waiting. And it needs to be addressed. And unless you hear the voice of lived experience from those families, the first thing I have to park every morning before I get out of bed is the pain and suffering, not only of my niece, which is ongoing with no medical solution, but also in relation to how families are bullied and threatened with child protection and all sorts. And it has to stop. And unless it's heard at the very top of HSE, and I work for HSE, but I'm speaking in a personal capacity, it has to be heard to change. You know, it has to be heard, and you have to get it. As the Public Accounts Committee said, you have to get it.
Thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to take one or two more, then we'll come back, and then we'll go back to more questions. I don't want to start. Yeah. We'll come back to it. Nobody will be left out. I'm going to go with the queue. Kate, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Thank you. Another question for Pat, and thank you for your presentation, because a lot of what you're saying seems to reflect what we all want. But I suppose the main issue that I see is the increased demand for direct payments amongst families and particularly young school leavers. And what I want to know is why aren't you providing a uniform approach, that there seems to be availability in some parts of the country for direct payments and not in others, and it's a struggle for families to get it. And I just feel that you should be using the power that you have in relation to the service providers to require them to use at least some of their funding for direct payments.
I'm going to come back to you, David. I'm going to come back to further questions. I'm just going to let some of the panel respond, and then I'm going to come back.
Can we go up here?
I might
I'm
answer.
going to say some of the panel.
So maybe just take it goes. So the Anne and Tiger's Claws, I mean, we wouldn't want, that's a really good description of the experience, and I understand what you're saying. So I suppose a couple of things that I don't know, I don't always know the detail of individual cases, but taking the point, as Paddy framed it in general, in relation to how our system doesn't always, so a couple of things I suppose. One is our system doesn't always respond as well as we might. So that's the thing I think we have to acknowledge. I certainly acknowledge it. I was a director of disability in my time, and one of the things I used to always value or set out for myself and people working with me was the notion of responsiveness. Because when I was a director, we didn't always have exactly what people were looking for, but at least if I could respond, or my staff could respond, at least in an honest, straight way, talk through with people, what is it you're looking for, how can we, I don't actually have, in my time it was therapeutic units for children, and we were core to that with Peter Kelly and so on, so that was a big high point at the time. But whether it's those high pointings or just the ordinary engagement at a local level, that is a hugely important thing. We are getting better at it, I think, but we're not yet absolutely not consistent enough or appropriate enough all the time. What I set out today in the slides, I suppose, is to try to, one thing is to move away from just the inconsistency and to put in the system which will help us to do this better as a HSE, as an organisation. So this, absolutely, but we've now established these new community healthcare organisations. We are establishing 90 networks, local networks, and the idea that there will be one person responsible at least, and then start to drive this out in a way where you know where you have to connect to, but also someone who's accountable. So if it's not working up in West Dingle, or if it's not working in Donegal, or if it's not working in Wexford, at least there'd be a known and identified person who could take responsibility for that. It may not be working. I acknowledge it isn't working everywhere. Don't want to pick on Wicklow in particular, but I think also there's another piece that flows from that, is that when we get things wrong, or if there is a difficulty or a conflict, the important thing is to have a way of engaging it, or to use, even if whether it is external advocacy, whether it's mediation, or whether it's mechanisms where we ensure that the voice of the service user or the family is heard, so that the thing can be resolved and try to get it done in some way. There will, of course, be times where we're rationing. There isn't enough resource to do all the things we want to do. We talked about respite earlier, residential, changing needs. We haven't been getting the kind of resource we need for that. So some of what we have to do is explain that, and some is try to respond in the best way possible we can. In relation to the model of service, I think that's really, really important. So a couple of things I'd like to say about that. Absolutely, there will be no one model or one size fits all. In relation to what has become known as the Congregated Settings Report, what it is a time to, actually the report is time to move on from congregated settings. And what I did today in my slide was I just said time to move on and residential services, because I think we have to get away from, we're too focused on congregated settings and so on. So part of it is, and one of the things we wanted to do positively with that report was to respond to the fact that there was at that time over 4,000 people living in large institutional settings that needed and deserved a better life. That is now at just over 2,500. We have a long way to go. The Minister said we're hopefully capital and other things, we will start to get the support. But that is only one part of it. There's 6,300 people also residential accommodation. And just to be clear, there's absolutely no question of forcing people to live a particular type of community life and impose that on them. So the model, any model, doesn't envisage that it's going to be, 5 or 7 day group homes and that's what you'll do and you'll live in the community. The work that Tilda are doing clearly articulates for us. If I take as an example a place like Oris and Tracton, there are a third of the people there, and we've done individual assessments, who are ready to live in the community. No problem, they need to be supported in the community. There's another third of people who need additional support, but there's a third of people who have very complex needs, aging, some of them in their 70s and 80s, some of them have medical needs and so on. So we have to work very carefully to look at with families, with service users, where they don't have families, and there are many there, advocates and others like Inclusion are working with us in Oris for self-advocacy and training with staff and others to do that. So we will come out with a roadmap for the future of a place like Oris and other congregated settings, and we will engage with families, with the service users themselves, number one, self-advocacy if needs be or whatever, and also with families and local communities, because the point was made earlier, if you don't engage with a local community and prepare the ground, well then people will actually become as isolated in the community as they were perhaps in a congregated setting. So I do want to reassure you about that.
I'm sorry, Pat, I just have to reply. We weren't consulted. There was no plans made. It was actually being hidden from the families. The 30 children in the school went to a meeting last week to be told about new directions and where it was going into the future. That's all the children from 0 to 18 where the families were asked. At that meeting, what was actually said by the agency representative, there is no legal obligation on the state to provide care for any person. They have a duty to give the assessment, but there is no legal obligation to provide care. This is what was said. And now, as the families of 6 children that are coming now, joining the 4 from the last 2 years with no day service, we're being told, and very nicely, now the money is through, great last Thursday, now will the families go out and see is there any building that they could locate in the community. Then it has to be got for lease, then it has to be refitted. There was no planning. So what you're saying is brilliant if you'd said it to us back 5 years ago, but you closed the door for us now. Now we're on catch up and we're just lost.
Just not to confuse the broader audience, the congregated settings, that's one particular thing, which I don't think particularly relates to this case, but in any event, whatever the situation was. Yeah, so that's the kind of day service policy and so on. But in respect of what it is, what we would be trying to do is to work through consultation, so we can deal with the specific case. I don't have a problem, and I know that the point was made about the case and engagement about it previously. So we'll come back to that. But in terms of there's the residential service and what we're trying to do there. There's new direction. We're trying to create new opportunities for people on the day service side. So and consultation is going to be a key piece of that. And the last one was the direct payment. So in relation to direct payment, like where we are with that and individualised budgeting and so on, is that like in the Transforming Lives, there's a commitment there that's to be looked at and evidentially proven that it's going to work and be appropriate. I think, and I was saying this to Paddy earlier, when the Department of Public Expenditure or government departments say that, I think some of the time the concern is that it's all about the money or the punctual expense. To be honest, I think what government wants is an assurance that we have a system. It clearly needs reform, and we're in the process of that. But they want to, whatever they're introducing in place of that, they need assurance that it's actually going to work. So in relation to the kind of direct payment stuff, and you mentioned Possibilities Plus, and you mentioned Martin Nopton and Ashna Tarkirta, like both of those are being supported by ourselves in the HSE, and we've included them in the process of evaluating how we're going to move the system forward. So they're two really positive organisations that we want to try to support, and we're working with them, and they're in the modelling of, well, how is it working there? And I know you said possibilities plus is relatively small, most of these are. There have been particular situations then where we've tried to facilitate where we can that type of approach that you gave, and obviously was talking in the workshop. But fundamentally, system-wide, what we're trying to do is develop that as a model that's sustainable. Now, one of the things that does happen in practical terms is if you're attending, you mentioned SOS there, and SOS are doing a lot of very creative work, but they have a resource from us that they're looking after the cohort of people they are looking after, and that requires resource. So if you take resource off that and put it somewhere else, unless you have enough to do it all, including for the new people, you know, if you take it from here, well, somebody else can lose out there. So it's to
Maybe
develop
you need to
that.
ask for more.
Absolutely, and we are asking for more. And as we ask for more, what government say to us in the Department of Public Expenditure is prove the model.
You
So,
can use the model if you put it in place
Yeah.
to prove it.
exactly.
It has to be in place.
Exactly.
to prove
Click here to
anything.
fail.
Which is why, systematically and evidentially, we're working specifically with Martin and with Possibilities Plus and others to show how the model can work and try to translate.
5 years.
You have to move for scale. I know you have to move. You have to move for scale.
And you have restricted them to only 14 families.
Okay, well that's fair. I mean, but the point is that's to do with the level of resource. But the point is we are going to actually try to learn from that as a model. Equally, I think the important piece the Minister talked about before he went, what he's done for us this year is got some additional resource on top of the planning resource that was there that will assist us. There are other challenges around that day service is on the existing cohort, it was mentioned in the contributions, is just actually capacity. We are in some parts of the country in competition with just the market and trying to secure actual capacity to run even innovative day services is proving challenging in some locations. But we're working on it and getting over it.
Mary, do you want to come in?
Did the business of another group sort of work in the model? You say you want to get away from the institutional and the huge big group looking after groups. Okay? You want to get rid of a big group looking after a smaller group, but you put in 2 more big groups to look after the smaller group. It's like as if you do not trust an individual to say, I know my needs, I can do this budget, I might need help, but you must have a group behind you. If you have 80 inclusion at some other group and say they're going to work and see if this model works, you're only replacing a large group for another large group. And it's like saying to me as a person of 63, I don't trust you with that budget, but have you got someone from a group to sign that they will make sure you do it right?
I think that's a really important point, and I don't want to just create this as a conversation between the floor and Pat, because there are other members of the panel, and I know Mary Mark Karen wants to come in, but one of the issues on direct payments, and we covered this at the direct payments event, is that there should be a menu of choices, including a direct payment into your bank account if that's what suits your particular needs. And brokers and intermediaries are another model for people who don't want to manage the funding themselves or don't want to employ staff. So there are various models in terms of direct payments that can be. Hang on, there are a lot of other people who have their hands up, so I want to come back to them. Mary, you want to come?
Yeah, I just wanted to address the issue in relation to the congregate settings. And just firstly to say that I think we're all in this room agreement that the congregated settings report has done really huge good for people with intellectual disability. It has moved a lot of people who are in institutional type settings out into more human services and good services in community. This needs to continue and there's still work to be done. However, the congregated settings report recognised itself as well that there were people with severe to profound intellectual disability and those who are ageing who we did need greater understanding and how best to support this population. And I think we really need to work on that and to continue to work and to see and knock a baby with the bathwater as such and knock and close without us first. There is an infinite resource and we need to ask ourselves, do we have the money to put in 2 or 3 staff into 10 houses because there's somebody in each of these 10 community houses with dementia or with very severe complex needs? And maybe we can, and we need to cost it. We need to look at the quality of life of people, that these people, that there will be no place for them. community, we need to understand what a community will look like for people who are continuing to fund IDS Tilda. This time now we have robust to support people with severe to profound intellectual, and particularly those who are ageing with complex needs. What will that service look like? And we need to be careful of institutionalisation emerging under a nursing home model, and we call it something different. And I think that's really, really important.
Okay, I just want to
members of the panel for being here. I think we've left out one very important person, and that's Paddy himself there. I'd like to compliment Paddy on the day. It's been brilliant. Just some issues there that it's like a moving feast.